Hello. This is a little podcast I thought about some things. I recently had a conversation with a family member concerning culture versus character, and I personally don't think those are separate Venn diagrams or anything of that nature. There's an overlap with everything. There's gray areas, and specifically he was talking about growing up in the 80s and 90s. He didn't have any Filipinos or Filipino Americans as role models growing up, and he's multiracial. He happens to be, I'm not putting his business out there, but he just, he's white and Filipino, but he didn't see any Filipinos in the media or on television or on the news or anything, and as role models. The only one he could see in recent memory was Pacquiao, and I noticed that when he said that, just for the fact is everybody comes from a different perspective, and he was always brought up to say it's the content of your character, not the color of your skin. In a lot of ways, I agree with that, but at the same time, as a darker skinned Filipino American who comes from a medium-sized city, and he grew up in a rural area, small town America. It was like country cousin, city cousin. I understand his perspective, but I also understand my perspective. And I, as a writer and an author, there's, like I said, there's overlap and there's gray areas, and it doesn't have to be separate. Because from my perspective, I grew up in a medium-sized city that had Filipino Americans. I didn't see them on TV. I didn't see them on the films. But what I did see was representation in my neighborhood, in my family, my uncles, my father, various other Filipinos, high school teachers, people that I worked with, people that were in the neighborhood. And then after I graduated from high school, I learned more about the history of Filipino culture. And it took me to get out of high school before I saw that, were representation in scientists, in doctors, in history, in writers, authors, in the arts, in engineers, and various other people. So I saw that because I was looking for role models in some ways that say, you know what, if you could see representation, people that look like you, that are positive people in society, that are constructive, that are helping your culture out, you're going to look at that and say, hey, that's a good inspiration. Not to say that that's the only inspiration, but growing up, it's important to know that you have, especially as a young man in my 20s, I needed to see that there was representation in my culture, because there's always, you can find that to happen in a lot of different races and ethnicities. You're either going to turn, and it's just generalization. You're either turn to white culture, black culture, or Mexican culture. Those pretty much are the options that growing up in the 80s and 90s, what you saw and what you drew from. It was hip-hop culture. It was Caucasian, European, American culture, or it was Hispanic, Latino, Mexican culture that you drew from, because you didn't see Filipinos representation on television, in movies. We didn't have social media in the 80s and 90s. Now, my nieces and nephews' generation, in some ways they're better off, because they can basically just bypass the whole cultural thing and just look at more as an individual based on content of their character instead of the color of the skin. But it's nice to see representation on movies and television, the people that look like you, not just look like you, that have the same experience levels. And I'll just bring it as a fact, the recent Spider-Man movie, where Spider-Man's friend Spider-Man went to his grandma. His Lola was speaking Tagalog, and I'm the sign. I'm not Tagalog, but it's close enough. I just got a laugh out of that. I got to laugh at the fact it's like, oh my God, the grandma's talking about aswangs and demons, and the Spider-Man looked like a monster. And I didn't get the full gist of it, but I saw the subtitles, and I don't really speak Filipino, but it's relatable. It's relatable because of the cultural aspect. Denzel Washington said it once. Yeah, maybe Scorsese or Spielberg could have done a certain movie, but it's a cultural thing. And I just have, I get that. When you're growing up in a certain culture, invested in a culture, that's what you grew up with, and you see that represented back to you. They always talk about art. Art is like a mirror to society, and that it sometimes it projects, and sometimes it showcases the society that you're in, the culture that you're in, the character the values that you represent. And I also bring, and in the conversation we had, it also brings it back to my faith, my Christian faith. How does that go into my faith? How does my faith is represented alongside that? And sometimes those little aspects of, okay, this is my faith, this is my ethnicity, this is my socio-economic background. How do those sections, and there's other sections that go into it, but it's not all about black and white issues. There's shades of gray, and I don't even like to say shades of gray, because there's nothing negative about my culture. There's nothing negative about my religious beliefs. There's nothing about of my socio-economic background per se. But it's just interesting how you can have different aspects of what you're going through, of how you're living your life. How do you want to represent your art? How do you want to represent your writing, your filmmaking, your plays that you write? How do you want to represent yourself as an individual outside of your culture? Because in the 90s, one thing that kind of always bothered me was like, people would say, oh, I don't see race, I don't see color, I'm colorblind. Yeah, if you're colorblind to that, it's almost like living in fantasy land, because you can say this is what happened, this is what's going on, and that's what's going on, and I just see a person as a person, and this is who they are as an individual. But at the same time, your upbringing, your ethnicity, your cultural values, because I'll just take it as an example. There's some cultures, when you speak to them, you look them straight in the eye as a sign of respect. Other cultures, and it's a cultural thing, I don't know if how to describe otherwise. If you look someone straight in the eye, that's a sign of disrespect. So it's a matter of what is your perspective, what are your values, what is your upbringing, what is the history behind, what's the history behind looking someone in the eye? Are you looking in the eyes, looking at them in the eye as a man speaking to them, or are you looking in the eye as a dog? Because some cultures if you look someone dead in the eye, straight in the eye, that's a sign of disrespect, where you say, I'm going to kill this person. And I've had not family members, I've had friends from different cultures say that to me. Say, hey, he's staring at me like a dog, like he's going to kill me. I'm like, hold on, wait a second. Where's this coming from? Well, this is how I was brought up. This is what and it was a Pacific Islander group told me that. And I say, hold on a second. He's not doing that. He's doing that as a sign of respect, to look you in the eye. And I'm like, and it's a matter of all these things come into play, and a lot of times it's just talking to the person, getting to know them as an individual, to see where they're coming from, what their cultural background is, who they are as a person. And it's funny because it's nature versus nurture, it's culture, and it's all this stuff gets intertwined, but it all boils down to mutual respect, speaking to each other as individuals, and not lumping to people as groups and say, oh, this person. And I'm just going through myself. I'm a second generation Filipino American, a 50-year-old second generation Filipino American, and as such, not just that, coming from a medium-sized city in California. Now you talk to somebody that's also a 50-year-old Filipino American, but maybe a female that's living in the country or grew up in a small rural town with maybe they were the only Filipino family in that city or that town. They're going to have a different perspective. That person, that 50-year-old Filipino American female, is going to be different. Or you might just break it down, maybe someone that's a 20-year-old Filipino American might have a different perspective than the 50-year-old. You got a Gen X versus a Gen, I don't want to say Gen Z, or a Gen Z, or a millennial, or a Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha is so crazy, I think, right now. They're like little 8-year-olds. They're 5-year-olds. And they're already becoming a marketable demographic and they've been a marketable demographic since they were born. And my little nieces, my nieces and nephews are going to have a different perspective on life, on interacting with people than my generation. And it's so interesting to know that. It's so interesting to have those conversations. And a lot of times we can close up and just surround ourselves in the echo chamber. And when we do that, there becomes problems. That lies the fact of, okay, we're so closed off, saying, oh, us four, no more. It becomes that whole thing what my cousin said, the grumpy old Filipino man. You can become that grumpy old Filipino and just say, get off my lawn, kid, you're for a call the cops type of thing. Or, you can interact with the younger crowd or the older crowd and find their perspective. I mean, I was literally had a family lunch with my family members, and we had 3 generations in there. We had the boomer, we had the Gen Xers, we had the we had the Gen Z, totally bypassed the millennials, Gen Z, then we had the Gen Alpha. We had 1 Gen Alpha in a room. So that was 4 generations in one room eating lunch. And it felt good because it was for family and we were all different perspectives, all, but we were all the same genetically. We're all related. We're all family members. And it was kind of cool in that way. So it's always interesting for me to have those conversations. It's when we stop having those conversations of, oh, how did you grow up? Or this is what happened, or this is what happened. It's good to find out how different, especially as a Christian, I can see that as, this is how I can relate to 4 to 5 generations of multi-generations of people, because we're all souls that are needing salvation. We're all, like, especially with my situation, I was telling my family, I grew up Catholic. I strayed from that. I went into indigenous Filipino traditional superstitious beliefs, and I found out that didn't help me. Then I embraced and I converted to Christianity for the sake of my soul, where I've know that Jesus brought me into the fold. And now because I've experienced those things, because I've been in those situations, I can reach out to people that are different than Christian beliefs. Some people I've recognized are, especially I've known as for Christianity, people that were so much in the Christian faith that they have blinders on. And it's sad because they don't reach out. They think that anything, it's like the us four no more situation. But that happens because of the nature versus nurture situation. Because if you're brought up, we're the right way, everyone else is wrong. But then also the other Christians that have are able to bypass their own whatever things they're going through and say, you know what? I'm going to reach out to this person across the aisle, across my political beliefs, across my religious beliefs, across different things I'm dealing with across the aisle, because that person is a soul in need of salvation. And it when you embrace it from that perspective, that's more close to the Christ. That's more, and people have asked me, why is my channel, my YouTube channel, called Kasama for Christ? Kasama means together. And I long to be together with Christ, with Jesus Christ. And to say that, you know what, I was lost, but now I'm saved. I was blind, but now I see. And when you're going from being blind to knowing that you can see, and the person that brought you that healing, you're going to share that healing. You're going to share that person that healed you with every soul that you encounter. All right, this has been a long, drawn-out talk, but you guys have a safe one. Be blessed and not stressed. And just remember, if you are, give it to Jesus. This is your friend Sam. You guys take care.